I'm Helen Armitage.
And I'm Chris Webb.
And you're listening to The Next Normal, the podcast that explores the impact that the COVID-19 pandemic has had and continues to have on different individuals, organisations and sectors spanning the world of business, education and careers.
On The New Normal, we heard from a range of individuals about how they were adapting to a challenging climate. And we're now taking this one step further as we look to the future and quiz another slate of fantastic guests about how they're planning for the unknown, what different sectors are doing to adapt, and whether any green shoots of optimism are starting to appear in the wake of the pandemic and subsequent lockdown.
Thank you for joining us as we explore what the next normal might look like for all of us on a local, national and global scale.
A very good morning and welcome to The Next Normal. As always, I'm joined by my co-host Helen Armitage. Helen, how are you doing this morning?
Yeah, good. Good. It's been an interesting week so far, I would say. I'm probably going on about a 7 out of 10. We'll go with that. Yeah. How about you? How are you, Chris?
Not bad, not bad. 7 out of 10 is slightly decreasing, but I think, that as the academic year, winds on, we can kind of expect that. So, yeah, I think probably about maybe 7, maybe pushing an 8. We're due to be completing on our house purchase this week, which has given me a little bit extra boost, but everything very stressful, of course. So, I'm gonna temper that a little bit. And we're very pleased today to be joined by Peter Hopwood. Peter is a global speaker coach, TEDx coach, and MC. Peter, thank you very much for joining us.
I'm glad to be here.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much for giving up your time. And we're really kind of excited to go through today's episode, which is we're kind of calling Talk the Talk, which is stealing from the very well-known UK charity of the same name. So I hope they don't take us to court for it. But
we'll see. We'll see.
That's the spirit. But we're very kind of keen to kind of focus on something that we've not really looked at yet, and maybe is something that people haven't considered so much during the pandemic, which is the work of kind of public speaking, both sort of conference speakers and also public speaking coaches like Peter, but also the process as well of public speaking and sort of presentations and speaking engagements and how that's changed as things have moved online. So really interested to get stuck into this. But before we do, we're going to start as always with our Gloombusters, our good news stories for the week. So Helen, any good news stories that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, so this is a story I picked up on The Guardian this morning, and it's entitled COVID and Brexit could see UK manufacturers bringing it all back home. So the impact of two huge external factors, Brexit and COVID, where the impact of Brexit could see increased tariffs on organisations that are importing and exporting goods and services into the UK and out of the UK, and also COVID, which has just completely disrupted the global supply chain for a lot of organisations. So what a lot of UK-based organisations now are contemplating is bringing manufacturing back home to the UK. ASOS have already started this, and other organisations are following closely behind. But I think this is really positive and incredibly interesting. I find, we've got countless years of history of a global supply chain that's everywhere around the world for all different types of goods and services. And the fact that could be completely abolished in some form and coming back home to the UK. I mean, I find it great for UK industry, but also jobs, the UK economy as well. I think it's really interesting. It's really interesting to follow this. I'm going to be keen to see just how far we go and how quickly that starts to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my good news story is a little bit of a follow-on from that, from an industry point of view. And I think many people will have seen in the news this week about the sort of the Green New Deal type announcement from the government. 4 billion invested into around sort of 250,000 jobs, green jobs as they're calling them, and some of the kind of big headline sort of announcements around that sort of move to 2030 for getting rid of the sale of petrol and diesel cars. And although a lot of this, I think, it's aspiration at the moment, again, it's starting the conversation. I think that's important because, we've maybe not seen a government up to this point really have that conversation in depth that this is the way the industry is changing and what that might mean for jobs and for upskilling or reskilling. So yeah, again, as you say, interesting developments. Proof will probably be in the pudding, but certainly interesting to see kind of how things develop from here. Peter, I'm not sure if you're going to complete the hat trick of industry-related good news stories, but what would you like to share with us?
I would have to say the answer to that is no, because my good news story is more on a personal level, and it's to do with something, the simple pleasures, the simple things that you maybe take for granted when they're perhaps taken away from you. So here in Croatia, in the shops, unlike in the UK where you can walk into a newsagent's or WH Smith and you look at how many different types of crisp packets there are, or sweets or chocolates. Cadbury's is not sold here in Croatia at all. However, 2 days ago, I found a box right at the bottom of the shelf on the side, right at the back, and there was a small box of Cadbury's Boosts. Now, this gave me so much pleasure that I had to buy 4 in a row. And yeah, so simply, clearly, if I was in the UK, I wouldn't buy four straight away Cadbury's Boost in WH Smith. But here, naturally, I do because I haven't got them. What's your favourite Cadbury's chocolate, actually, Chris and Helen? What would, if there was one that you could have above all the rest, which one would it be?
For me, Cadbury's buttons, giant buttons. I'm
the buttons.
I'm not too fussed
the big ones.
The buttons. Yeah, the big buttons. I'm not too fussed about mixing alcohol with chocolate or fruit with chocolate. I find it too. I just like plain dairy milk chocolate.
Straight talking with chocolate.
Straight talking. Yeah. Just don't mess with it.
No messing around.
Perfect as it is. Don't mess with it. It's fine. So yeah, the giant buttons for me. But I'm keen to know, were the Boosts in date? If they were at the back of the shelf, I mean, unless they're really on their stock rotation.
You thinking they're old ones? You thinking they're old Boosts, like the ones that are almost out of date? Chuck them over to Croatia. Well, listen, I've already had 4, and I'm feeling okay. By the time this podcast comes out, it may be different. I don't know, but I think I'm all right.
Have we just changed the topic of the podcast to stock rotation and out of date chocolate?
It's Cadbury's. Yeah, it's a Cadbury's podcast, really, isn't it? Chris, what are you going for?
Yeah, for me, it's standard dairy milk, and your story actually took me back when I lived in Vietnam. It was very similar. You had to go to all the expat stores to get the kind of
really
mostly Hershey's, and it tasted like soap. It was horrible. So when you found dairy milk, it was usually something outrageous, like £4 for a bar or something. But it was worth it. It was worth it. So yeah, for me, dairy milk straight down the line.
So there you go. That's my good news, personal good news. And again, small pleasures that maybe we should always appreciate when we can.
Yeah, I think that's great to hear, particularly at this point in time, as you say, where a lot of people are probably trying to make the most of small pleasures when they can. So fantastic. Well, great to hear those good news stories. And let's move on with the bulk of the show. Helen, over to you.
I'm hoping we can keep this momentum going now. We've not peaked already, but we'll dive in with
this is the moment everybody tunes out.
We've heard from the chocolate, that's it. But we'll dive into the first discussion topic. So, given the recent restrictions around in-person events since the start of COVID-19 pandemic, how has this impacted your work and the work that your clients are involved in the speaking circuit?
Tremendously. So as two main halves of the work that I do. And that's as an MC, a host, somebody who shapes tech conferences in Europe, globally, on behalf of event producers. All these gatherings suddenly overnight just stopped because naturally, nobody could gather anymore. No more flights. People had restrictions going from country to country. So planning an event takes a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of money, a lot of manpower, and then suddenly, bang, click of a finger, that they all stopped. So that naturally meant that my jobs, my potential jobs, the ones I already had in the bag, as it were all cancelled. And then literally trying to figure out, the event producers trying to figure out the next move. Do they go online? Do they cancel? Trying to figure out what the next move will be, which was really difficult because nobody kind of really knew. Things were changing from country to country. There were different ways of communicating what's actually happening in different countries, certainly in the UK. So it really difficult to kind of navigate where things were moving forward. On the other side of my work, in terms of coaching, the majority of my work is face-to-face. You can do coaching online, naturally. However, ideally, certainly my style is more face-to-face with them, because you can feel what they're feeling. You can help them more. There's more of an impact. So a lot of my work got cut in half, and it also kind of forced me to adapt more in terms of sharing my work online, which I'm still working that out. I'm still navigating through that, but definitely, you know, it's a kind of a kick in the teeth, punch in the face, and trying to work out what was next. But all through this, I must say, all through this, you know, I stayed healthy. A lot of us stayed healthy, and that was the main thing. So although it's doom and gloom, there are still, you know, people were still optimistic, and people still are optimistic about how things are moving forward, and where things will be, let's say in 2021, mid 2021.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I suppose it's, as you were saying earlier, wasn't it, those kind of small things that you can take enjoyment from or feel lucky about, you know, are particularly important at this point in time. I mean, you mentioned there, obviously, Peter, that your work kind of takes on two strands. You've got the sort of speaking engagement side, and then, as you mentioned, you know, the public speaking coaching or TEDx coaching, speaker coaching. And I think this is something that obviously we were very keen to explore within the podcast, which was kind of looking a little bit, as we always do in the podcast, at misconceptions. And I think, you know, when we've spoken previously, we've talked about those kind of misconceptions around public speaking. So I suppose one thing we wanted to ask was, what are some of those key messages from your work in this area in terms of kind of coaching, speaking itself, that you'd like to share with our listeners? And are there any sort of common misconceptions that maybe you'd like to share?
Sure, absolutely. So, I mean, the first thing is when we talk about public speaking, and if you haven't done a lot of it, or maybe you haven't got too much experience of it, a lot of us kind of tend to kind of steer away from it, because it's something which kind of creates a lot of anxiety within us. We feel fearful of it. It's something that we want to avoid rather than approach. And so, you know, you read about it, you hear about it a lot online, and most of us think it's this big, fearful, ugly kind of thing that we all know perhaps we should be doing, improving the skill of. But in fact, we don't. But the truth of the matter is, it's not as bad as we think, or as we're told. All right. So it's literally a skill. It's something you practice doing, you keep practicing doing, and anything that we do lots of, naturally we get more confident at. And when we get more confident at it, if we mix that together with a bit of self-awareness and the willingness to improve, we can actually move forward quite quickly. So it's like you're getting chucked into a swimming pool, and your instinct, before you get chucked in, if you knew you were going to get chucked in, you'd be thinking, oh my God, I'm going to drown. This is not good at all. But when you actually fall in, when you're in the water, what do? Somehow you move your body, somehow you kind of start to stay afloat, and then somehow you kind of start to move, and then you start to swim, paddle, and then swim, and then you move forward. So it's a little bit like that. The more you do of it, the more you get better at it, and you realize it's not actually something to be really fearful of. Yes, it can be difficult, and yes, all these other things to do with the anxiety based on what you think people are, the perception of other people of you, the judgment, letting people judge you, all these things. Yes, it can be quite frightening. But, you know, I would say, when I sit down with the client, the first thing we talk about is really finding out what's going on in his or her head, right? What's happening? How do they see themselves? What's their perception of all this, which will help me help them kind of realize that it's not as bad as everyone thinks. Another thing as well is the mindset that you have plays such an important role in everything you do, in terms of sharing your messages, how you sound, what you look like, how you come across, the perception of other people of you. A lot of people think it's okay if you move your body like this, it's going to be okay. If you sound like this, it's going to be fine. If you say these things, this is how you're going to be a good public speaker. When in fact, most of the work is well before you even hit the stage, and that's your mindset, getting into the right frame of mind, thinking about the purpose of what you're doing, you know, the value. What are you going to share to your audience? What are they going to get when you've finished? What's the value you're going to share? Because at the end of the day, that's what an audience wants. He or she does not care. An audience do not care about you. They don't care about anybody, literally, but what they're going to get at that moment. And if you can give that to them and they walk away with something of value, something that changes their opinion, perhaps gets them to think differently, or inspires them in some way to approach a topic in a different way, where you've changed something, then you've done your job. So thinking about your value, the value you're going to share to your audience, what they want, what they need, will just get you in the right frame of mind, and you will feel better about that, and you will sound better. And as an audience, we pick that up straight away. We can tell. We're very, very good. Humans are excellent at really sort of picking up these non-verbal cues. And in fact, apparently ladies are a lot better at doing this than men. What do you think, Helen? Are you with me on that one? Well, I can see you nodding. Nobody can see you nodding, but I can see you nodding.
I would say yeah. From my experience
Intuition
of being in an audience and hearing people and watching people give presentations and pitches and speeches, I think, I would say you pick up on things. But maybe that is because if they're feeling anxious, and I've also been in a situation where I've had to do presentations and pitches before, maybe when I was a bit younger, but there is that nervous anxiety there. So maybe it's you can relate to it, and therefore you pick it up easier. I'm not sure.
I think it's interesting how similar that advice is compared to what we would talk about sometimes as careers advisors, in terms of kind of understanding your value in the narrative and what you have to offer to, whether it's employers or to organizations or to, universities or institutions, before kind of doing that, having that mindset and knowing your own value first provide you with so much ammunition. So it's really interesting to hear that kind of fed back from a public speaking point of view. I think what would be really interesting to find out, I don't know whether you can share this with us, is the type of people that come and approach you to kind of receive your coaching, I suppose, because I think maybe there might be a common, I don't know, those of us who've seen films will think, oh, is it all going to be like the King's Speech, or is it going to be like, Musharraf from Educating Yorkshire, somebody who's got a terrible fear of public speaking or a speech impediment, and they desperately need to kind of get things right for this one big presentation. But I imagine it's probably a little bit more nuanced than that.
I would agree. A king, no royalty has approached me yet. Although once they hear that I have a stash of Cadbury's Boosts, they might just come knocking on my door. However, no, it's a full range of different people who are just wanting to share their messages better, and that could be a CEO or a set of managers, let's say. And I would go into their company and we would, try to align the same kind of the communication style and the same kind of messages that they want to portray, they want to share with the people they work with, and also maybe perhaps clients and customers. Or it could be a specific type of project, like a CEO, for example. 2 CEOs, they approached me last year, and this was about 2 months before they had their first conference. They were doing their own company conference, and they had about 500-600 people in the audience, and their company is actually most of it, about 80%, are remote workers. So this was the very first time everybody was coming together, and the very first time actually everybody could actually meet and see face to face the CEOs. So it was really, really important to really define the messages they wanted to share, define how they wanted to be perceived, and also, again, when they finish, what is it that they're going to share that they want their employees to walk away with. So they had never spoken to anybody on stage ever. So it was a long process, but it was a really, really intricate process to get our teeth into. So working out the storyline, working out the messages. Once we had that, we then started to work on actually delivering those messages. And once they felt really comfortable with what they were saying, then we can start playing around with how you deliver your messages, using tools, using techniques with your voice, with your body, just things that you can kind of polish up with on top of that. So yeah, the answer really is a whole range of different people. Somebody, let's say, you might have sometimes speakers come to me, like professional speakers that are already getting paid to do their job on stages around the world. So already their confidence is quite high. However, they always appreciate that they need to improve, because, you know, a professional speaker, is quite a lonely job. And it's easy to become kind of narcissistic, and your ego is quite big. A lot of speakers, their egos are quite big because they get paid a lot of money. They go around the world. They're on the center stage every time. But that does not mean that they always give a powerful and impactful speech. You know, confidence is one thing, which a lot of people have, and that's great. But confidence together with the actual messages and the story and the impact you want to share, that's really where it comes into play. So sometimes they come to me and it gives me a chance to kind of identify areas that they have not even realized they need to polish up on, but they know they need to polish it. So I look at them, I hear them, and we kind of tweak things, and maybe there's different ways of saying things that sound better, that will actually get through to their audiences a little bit better, or maybe just switching around chunks or sections of their speech to just make it flow slightly better as well. Or maybe even just completely changing it up, you know, throwing things out and doing something completely different. You know, it might mean that. So going back to the original question, yeah, a whole range of different clients wanting different things, but at the end of the day, all wanting to create the right impact and improve. That's the thing, to improve.
Okay, so this is part of the podcast where we ask our guests to tell his or her favourite podcast. So, Peter, over to you. What's your favourite podcast at the moment?
Well, right now, there's a podcast called the Hypnotic Language Hacks podcast by Jason Linett. Now, I know it sounds kind of like a bit strange, all about hypnosis and all that kind of strange things, but at the end of the day, it's not. It's the guy is actually, Jason is a hypnotist. However, he works with business owners, he works with entrepreneurs, and it's all kind of like really straight talking ideas, insights, tips, things to make us more aware of the language we're using in getting people to think a bit more about the reaction they're going to give. So it's as I say, it's more about looking at language in terms of stories, looking at language in terms of how you want to be perceived, looking at language on how you want to maybe persuade someone to do something. So it's really intriguing and really interesting. And I listen to this. It gives me a few tips as well. And I would recommend this to anyone who really values what communication is all about, and specifically the words we use. Just think about them a little bit more. Finding the right words at the right time might actually mean a big difference in your impact and who you're talking to. Okay, the second one is called The Business of Story. Business of Story by Park Howell. Now, again, this is really, really good. So again, I'm fascinated and passionate about sharing stories, about helping people to find their story and share it in the right way. And here you've literally got, I think there's more than 200 different episodes, all based on stories and how to share them, and all those kind of intriguing, intricate ideas on what stories are all about, how you can put yours together, how you can create more impact. So definitely, you know, if you're again you value what storytelling is about, certainly this one would be for you. The last one is called the Mindset School Podcast. The Mindset School Podcast. Again, this one's only been going for about, I think, since May, April, May. A young lady who lives in the UK. I think she's from Lithuania, and she shares, I think it's a weekly or every 2 weeks, this podcast all about mindset and how we can kind of think more about our confidence and trying to boost our self-esteem, and sort of tricks, tips and ideas and conversations with certain guests that can help us think and be more aware of sort of tapping into our own mindset, which can only be good. And again, it's connected with what I do in terms of trying to help people get in the right frame of mind, ready to share their messages to their audiences. So yeah, it helps me a lot anyway. And I hope it would help you as well. So the Mindset School podcast.
Brilliant. Thanks, Peter. Definitely checking those out. That's really interesting, the variety of speakers that you get there. And that leads quite nicely. I liked what you were saying there about CEOs coming to you for help with speeches to their members of staff. But in the current times as well, I'm just thinking how that kind of relates to this next discussion topic, which is about changing the way of moving to online delivery and not delivering face-to-face anymore. So what impact do you think presenting to an audience via video rather than in person has on a speaker and the audience? And do you think you have any tips for our listeners in terms of maintaining engagement in the online world?
Yeah, sure. You've just said the word there, engagement, which is the biggest difference between somebody sharing, let's say, face to face on a stage or in a room with an audience, compared to what we're doing right now. Nobody can see this, but we're literally square box. I'm sitting here, you're sitting there, and we're looking through this kind of digital square box. And so the engagement level has to be raised when we're online, because there are so many more different distractions, and there are so many more events online. Everything is literally online now. So the connection and the engagement level, to keep that engagement going, you have to think about how you're going to do it, and you have to keep that going, literally, because if you don't, people will tune out. I mean, even this podcast, we are competing, you are competing against TV, against Facebook, against everything online, all different things online. This is one more part of the puzzle that we kind of got to get used to. So yeah, engagement is really, really important. And so there are lots of ways you can kind of approach that, and lots of things you can do. Some of those things is like to think about, first of all, how you're going to show up. So showing up online is the first thing, because it's the first impression we get. So, for example, the very first thing is, the Zoom or the online platform, whatever you're on, just make sure the camera is eye level. Okay, so many, even we see on Sky News, I still see bookshelves behind, and then the camera is right up 2 nostrils, which isn't always pleasant. Sometimes it is, but most of the time it isn't. And the lighting's really bad, and sound's not good. So good sound, invest in a small microphone. Doesn't have to be great, but something that sounds good, sounds okay. Lighting, make sure that your lighting's okay. Again, you don't have to buy a Ring halo light, LED light, but if you have sort of natural light, that's really important as well. The camera, make sure it's at eye level, so it's not looking down at you and you're not looking up, or even you're looking down. Just keep it straight. So those are the sort of simple things to think about in terms of showing up. But remember, it's not just about how we show up when we speak online, but it's also how we listen online. So showing up, how we listen is really important. So we've seen it as well. We're listening, or we're speaking, or somebody else is speaking, and we can see in the boxes other people, and they're putting their hands on their chin, they're looking bored, they're scratching their faces, they may be going on their phones, maybe doing something else, or maybe searching online something else as well. So it's just as much as how you show up when you speak, but also when you're listening as well. Another good tip as well, remember, try to keep everything as concise as you can. Again, the engagement level has to be snappy, it has to be as high as possible. So one of the ways to do that is, what you're sharing, try to keep it concise. Anything on television, TV, reporters, anchors, they don't waffle, they don't just carry on. They share what they have to share. They have a point to make. They have some information they want to share, and they close it, and then that's it. So try not to waffle on, and try to keep as concise as you can. Also, your voice is, I would argue, actually the number one influencer in terms of how we make our judgment of somebody, even by when we look at them, even by what they're wearing, even by what they're saying. The voice and the melody, the sound of the voice, because it's all about the sound, right? The sound that we share and how we share that sound, the melody, the tone, the pace, pitch, the kind of paralinguistics, which are basically the way we say stuff, the way we say something. So we could, like sarcasm, or when you don't like something, or when you're excited, all this comes out when you speak. And so to try to keep your voice with a little bit of melody, with a little bit more articulation. Slowing down is a really, really, really good thing as well, especially online. You don't have to speak quickly. You don't, even when we're nervous. Often when we're nervous, two things happen. The speed of our voice kind of goes up. It's quicker, and also our movement. We actually move a lot because all of this energy, this kind of anxiety, has to get out somewhere. So staying still, which is easier to do when you're sitting down, and thinking about how you sound is a good thing. And one tip to do that is just be more aware of your voice. Listen back to your webinars. Listen back to the podcast that you do. Ask somebody, or record your voice on your phone, and then just listen to that. So the more aware we are of our voice, of the sounds we're making, the more we can kind of almost critique ourselves to get better. So slowing down, be more concise, and share your messages with a little bit more intonation, perhaps a little bit more melody as well. Because if we hear people, and not everyone has a great voice, and that's okay. But the thing about the voice, it's not about the talent you've got. It's about what you do with it. It's about how you share your messages and what they sound like. So that can all be worked on.
Well, I am hooked, Peter. I really am. I think what you've said there has been absolutely brilliant. And I think me personally, I've just picked up so many tips and things to think about. So that's great. And I think for our students and graduates listening to this as well, who are maybe going forward for placement interviews, internship interviews, or graduate role interviews, which predominantly will be done through Zoom or through Teams or through another platform as well. I think just for their progression and enable them to feel confident on an interview, a video interview like that. I think that's just having those tips and thinking about those things, I think is really useful, for a lot of different people in a lot of different situations. So thank you. I was just mesmerized then by what you were saying, but thank you. That's been great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting how much of the content of this podcast is sort of transfers over to so many of those other facets of life. And I suppose, Peter, it's as you've been saying, it's, the type of people that will approach you about the type of work that you do. It's far from being just people who want to go and present. It's, it's about how people present themselves and how they articulate themselves and communicate their message on maybe a number of different levels, and not just, from the point of view of people who are traditionally speaking at, events, conferences, and those sort of things. And I think, you've given us a really good insight into maybe how things have changed, I suppose, over the past kind of 7-8 months, in the speaking sector, and how perhaps people are adapting. But I suppose to end the podcast as we typically do, it'd be really useful to hear what you feel maybe the next normal will look like within the industry, and whether you feel that perhaps there is a return to kind of a more blended approach for speaking engagements coming back, or whether, we might have a completely different scenario in the future.
Yeah, I mean, there's, I would say there's sort of 3 different camps, 3 different areas, 3 different categories people are more or less in terms of the events industry and speaking industry, let's say. First one is, let's say, thinking about everything online. Sort of everything's moved to online. Almost everything is online now. Certainly lots of benefits of that. It's a lot cheaper. It's a lot more economical. You can put together an event, and as I said before, a large event might take, you've got 10, 20, 25 people who are working on this all year round, and then you put together an online event. You only need 5 people, and a quarter of the budget. So it all makes sense, and you can actually reach out. If you do your marketing really well, you can reach out to a complete global audience. So a lot of people are saying, well, this is the way forward and we're not going to lose this. We're going to continue with this and go forward. Then, of course, on the other side of the coin, there are people that, that are going for live events, bringing them back. And this is the way forward. This is what we want to have. Again, starting 2021, live events, and I would say that I would agree. It's really important when we listening to somebody in front of us on a stage, sharing their messages, that kind of live theatre feel. You can't get that online. It's really difficult to replicate that online at all. So yeah, and the fact of going to an event, and do you actually remember more? Is it more of an impact on you when you actually go there? You've gone to you're staying in a hotel, you're watching the conference, at the conference, you're meeting people, you're eating there, the whole kind of project of going to a conference to walk away with ideas, and then you get back. Do you remember all that kind of stuff more than, let's say, a couple of hours online at home, which you're probably doing with all the other events and everything else in your life, into professional life, let's say, already? So those are the two. There's also the sort of third one, which is kind of a mixture of the two, a kind of hybrid events where you've got almost like a studio, a TV studio, like a kind of American late night TV shows where you've got a small kind of audience and you've got a nice studio where you invite guests, or you invite guests virtually on a big screen, but the host is a real host there, shaping the stage, shaping the show, but everything is online. So you're again opening up to the world, if you can do your marketing well, if it seems to work, because again, so many events. And so many events that are, you hear them saying that, they're hitting 300, 500,000 people will be attending. But we never actually always know how many attendees are actually attending these events. And my honest guess is a lot lower than we think, because again, the choice is so varied, so diverse. And if you've got so many different, it's again like podcasts, we have so much choice. And why would you listen to one specific podcast? Subscribe to that podcast, keep listening to that podcast. Those are the questions to ask to get the people to come on in and stay with you. And that's the same thing as well. Again, like I said before, we all, you're competing against anything online event or trying to bring people in. They're competing against TV, internet, kids in the background, all these other things that are distractions that are keeping our priorities maybe to the other side rather than the virtual event. So those are the three sort of areas. I would say, I particularly, and naturally I'm a little bit biased, I would love to see events come back fully again, and I think they will. I think there will be a kind of mixture. So keep pushing forward with events and making them big and getting lots of people, lots of attendees coming to them, but at the same time really opening up the virtual world to those events as well. A lot of them were doing this before anyway, but now everybody's kind of they were forced to really focus on it as a way of generating money, of actually earning from them. They're going to look at ways they can do both of those things. So I think, I don't think it's just going to be everything online. I think that personal face-to-face communication, interaction, if anything, we're missing that now, aren't we? I think that's something we're looking forward to get back into. So yeah, I would like to say that, not start of next year. I doubt whether it will be start of next year, but I think certainly 2021, which will be hitting a year of this madness, trying to bring back some kind of normality to the things that we enjoyed before. We maybe didn't even realize we enjoyed it, because I remember, and I'm sure you've heard the same thing as well, so many different events, people going to what's the actual value of going to an event. But in fact, certainly where I'm sitting now, there are lots more benefits of of going to an event face to face rather than an online event.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you've masterfully brought us back full circle there, as you said, to enjoying the little things, which takes us straight back to the Cadbury's Boost at the beginning of the show. So wonderfully done. I mean, yeah, some brilliant insights there. I think particularly around, as you say, that saturation point of how much content is online now, how people distinguish themselves. And I think, as you say, the way that those physical events make you feel, no distractions, typically phones away, all those sort of things. And it's similar issues that we actually kind of grappled with in a way in our e-learning episode. So, a lot of kind of parallels there as well.
I'd like to just ask you right now, Chris and Helen, what do you think? What camp are you in? 1, 2, or 3? Events in person or kind of mixture? What would you like? What do you appreciate?
Personal thing for me has to be physical events, because I'm a big sports fan, but I think the future will have to be blended, as you say. I think that, there's no, putting everything back in the box, as it were. It's all out now. And I think, as you said, it actually opens up events to a lot more people when it's online. So in fact, I think that mix is almost going to be essential now. Yeah.
I mean, I think just going back to the impact of going to an event, a conference, as you've perfectly said there, I as well remember things more by actually being in a different context, in that different landscape. So you can just take in, I think, a lot more. But I do see the flip side of it, where for an organisation that's maybe funding members of staff to go to conferences and events, the financial cost of that is a massive pocket of money that is spent on just getting staff members to conferences and events. And I think from a financial point of view, I can see the sense in that. But also, how much is the member of staff going to take in if they're just on 2 hours worth of Zoom and that's the conference? So I think there needs to be a happy medium. I think we've gone too far into this virtual world now to back out and just ignore it and pretend that it never happened. I think we do understand and we see the value of it. But I think we also now, again, saturation point is a perfect way of putting it. I think we can't go into this whole hog. We need to have a mix of the two, I think, and that will be a happy medium. Yeah.
Chris, what you just mentioned just a little bit earlier in terms of a sporting event, so it just made me think of. So I'm from Watford, and I follow the unfortunate events of Watford Football Club, although we're almost topping that well, with about 5th or 6th in the Championship. However, just the idea of sitting down now in a stadium with supporters, cheering on your team, watching football, hearing the thud of the ball being kicked, hearing people shouting and screaming, hearing people booing, all that, and seeing footballers move around on a pitch in the flesh, live, is something that I'm just, by saying that to myself, I'm not getting excited, but I feel kind of, it feels like a really good thing. If someone was to offer that to me tomorrow, not that I would pay a lot of money for it, because I think it's too expensive anyway, but it's a really cool thing, isn't it? Where we are right now in this state of play, something live makes all the difference. And again, football matches that we see on TV now, they're all competing with our attention on a screen. So attention on a screen, it was already kind of difficult before, with social media and all the things that are distracting us. But now we've got our sporting events, we've got our everything that's kind of a passion for us is on a screen. So I think, getting away from that, we're kind of ready now. We're all ready. Most of us are ready to put down the screens and start discovering again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's that big question, that next normal question across almost all industries at the moment. So a perfect point really to kind of finish the podcast on for today. So everything that we've kind of talked about, obviously there's been a huge amount of content we've covered, but if you want to find out a little bit more about Peter, his bio is going to be in the episode notes and links to some of the podcasts that he's talked about, but also some of the stories that Helen and I have talked about in the Good News Gloombusters section as well. But all that remains left to be said is thanks very much to Peter for joining us today.
Thanks so much. It's been a pleasure. Great.
Thanks, Peter. That's been great.
Fantastic. And thanks to those listening at home. Have a great day. If you're interested in anything that's been discussed on the podcast, or would like to be involved as a guest or have a topic to share, please get in touch with Helen or I via LinkedIn. Full details can be found in the episode notes on the Simplecast site.